In the Divine Treasury, which we will be paying a visit to, I will be unboxing another Equinox Hero Collector item, this time the USS Equinox from, of course, the Star Trek Voyager episode. Equinox, or Equinox, if you prefer. We will be paying a visit to Grabthar's Toolbox, and another installment of the Build the Enterprise. Again, this is Hero Collector Eaglemoss, the Build the Enterprise part work. Just the one section. I do say at the beginning of the video I'm aiming to do 2 sections, but basically I've run out of time because it was complicated. You'll see what I mean when you watch that. But yeah, section 21 of the Build the Enterprise. And of course, as ever, we bring you the latest in Star Trek and general science fiction news. But to get us going, our deep dive on the Vulcan race, and there is a lot to talk about with the Vulcans. Obviously, they are a stalwart member of the Star Trek franchise. They're from day one, of course, with Mr. Spock in the pilot episode. Now let's talk a little bit first of all about what makes Vulcans physically similar and different from humans in their biology. Now, species in general that shared some physiological and behavioural traits with Vulcans were categorised as proto-Vulcan humanoids. One example of this, of course, is the Mintarkans from Next Generation. In addition to that, Rigelian physiology was very similar to that of Vulcans. Vulcans, of course, generally very similar to humans in appearance, distinguished mainly by pointed ears and upswept eyebrows. Their skin colour was mostly pale with a bronze or greenish tint, although of course some did have brown skin. Vulcan physiognomy could resemble humans of European, Asians or African descent. They did have hair. I'm very envious. They had straight glossy black hair, though brown and or curly hair was also possible. Vulcans had body hair similar to humans, and some males could be very hirsute. Vulcan males were capable of growing facial hair, but most chose to shave it. Vulcan teeth included anterior tricuspids, which could be protected from decay for decades by sealing them with a trifluorinate compound, as we found out in the series Enterprise. And in contrast to their external similarities, Vulcans' internal anatomy, however, differed radically from that of us humans. For instance, their heart was where a human's liver would normally be, and it beat several hundred times per minute. Vulcans, in addition, had no appendix. Well, actually, that's a similarity with me now. Mine exploded some years ago. So yes, Vulcans are born with no appendix, though, is the difference there. They did have, however, mitochondria. The Vulcan blood itself was copper-based, hence their greenish tint, and was copper or rust-coloured when deoxygenated in the veins, and green when oxygenated in the arteries or when bleeding. Bruises and dermal abrasions took on a greenish hue. Vulcan body chemistry used little, if any, sodium chloride compared to that of humans, so not a very good meal for a salt vampire, of course. And speaking of meals, the Vulcan digestive tract was highly adaptable, although alien foods, notably human food, would occasionally disagree with a Vulcan. Given time, their body could adapt to the alien food. However, I'll say this very quietly, Vulcan hearing was very sensitive. And Vulcan females in particular possessed a heightened sense of smell. Now, having evolved on a planet that was mostly desert, Vulcans developed ways of surviving in desert conditions. For example, they could survive for several days without water, and they also had a second set of inner eyelids which protected their eyes. Now, Vulcans consider themselves very superior in many ways, but one way is that they did indeed have a superior metabolism to humans. Things like caffeine and sapotoxins had very little effect on them. They were also capable of surviving for long durations without food or sleep. Now, under stress, Vulcans could do without sleep for weeks. Tuvok once claimed that as a Vulcan he was capable of going without sleep for 2 weeks. Although, shortly after making that claim, he was observed to fall asleep in the command chair after having gone a little over 10 days without sleep. So was he exaggerating? Vulcans were on average 3 times physically stronger than humans and had considerably faster reflexes. They were very sensitive to nitrous oxide gas, which rapidly rendered them unconscious, and they typically had a lifespan of 200 years or more. Now, on to the history of the Vulcans. The Vulcans, or as they were also called in the original series, Vulcanians, were a warp-capable humanoid species from the planet Vulcan, widely renowned for their strict adherence to logic and reason, as well as their remarkable stoicism. In 2154, T'Pol stated that Vulcans had evolved on Vulcan. Roughly a century later, however, Spock theorised that the Vulcans might be descendants of the Eretans. According to Narek, the myth of Ganmadan, Narek of course being a Romulan, the myth of Ganmadan dated back to before the Romulan and Vulcan ancestors first arrived on Vulcan. In 2369, evidence was discovered that several species, including the Romulans, and therefore also the Vulcans, could be traced back to DNA that had been seeded on many planets by ancient humanoids 4.5 billion years before. Now, contrary to popular belief, Vulcans were in fact once an extremely violent and emotional people, even by our standards here on Earth. They waged almost constant warfare on one another. Paranoia and homicidal rage were common. They believed in a variety of gods, such as war, peace, and death. But as their level of technology increased, the Vulcans eventually reached a point where their violent nature threatened the extinction of their own species. Now, in order to avoid this fate, one Vulcan named Surak developed a new philosophy, thereby igniting what was called the Time of Awakening. Surak maintained that the root cause of all the problems on Vulcan lay in the uncontrolled outpouring of his people's emotions. His followers swore to live their lives by an ethical system devised by Surak and based purely on logical principles. Emotions were to be controlled and repressed. Although this new philosophy spread rapidly across Vulcan, a minority, many of whom were known as those who march beneath the Raptor's wings, rejected Surak's ideals. A destructive war began, including the use of atomic bombs, and amongst the victims was Surak himself. Eventually, however, those who opposed logic left Vulcan and founded colonies elsewhere, most notably on the planet Romulus, where they founded what eventually became the Romulan Star Empire. Now, at some point in history, the Romulans and Vulcans engaged in a 100-year-long war against one another. The war was instigated by the actions of a member of the Q Continuum, in fact. There's naughty Q. Another group that rejected Surak's philosophy was known as the Vitosh Katur, or Vulcans without logic. The Vitosh Katur believed in controlling emotions by allowing themselves to actively experience them rather than suppressing them. Some of these had also left Vulcan and took up a nomadic existence. A prime example of the Vatosh Couture was Cybok, who tried to use emotion rather than logic to find the answer to the creator of the universe. The Vulcans conducted a series of survey missions to the Sol system as early as 1957. Vulcans were in fact one of the first species to develop warp drive, though a century passed between first warp flight and breaking of the warp 2 barrier. T'Pol once told Captain Archer that Vulcans don't share humans' enthusiasm for space exploration. But a Cyrenite on Vulcan later advised Archer that this may not have been true. The official first contact between Vulcans and humans came on April the 5th, 2063, when a Vulcan survey ship, the Toplana Hath, detected the warp flight of Zeph Cochrane's Phoenix. The Vulcans met with Cochrane at his launch site on the day following his flight. Subsequently, the Vulcans offered their technological guidance to humans, but were criticised on Earth for holding back their development. A century after first contact, the High Command had become worried about humans, who, like Vulcans, had had devastating wars, but after which had rebuilt it and started travelling to the stars much faster than the Vulcans had. There were those on the High Command who wondered what humans would achieve in the century to come, and they did not like the answer that they were coming to. By the mid-22nd century, Vulcan culture had strayed from the path that Surak had originally laid out for them, to the point that Surak's Katra did not recognise it as the culture that he had helped to create. The Katra being, of course, the spirit that was passed on and carried by others. They had ceased being explorers, and the High Command, once devoted to that goal, had instead become involved in a conflict with the neighbouring Andorians. The Vulcan High Command used an ancient monastery at Pajam as a secret listening post to spy on the Andorians until June of 2151, when the listening post was discovered by the Andorians and a landing party from the original Enterprise NX-01. Later on, those same humans helped negotiate peace between the Vulcans and Andorians over a disputed Class D planetoid known to the Vulcans as Pan Makar. Vulcans also became less tolerant of political and philosophical challenges towards the High Command's operations, notably engaging in purges of the Cyrenite group, who claimed that Vulcan society was no longer following the teachings of Surak. These tensions came to a head in a crisis called the Vulcan Reformation, which resulted in the overthrow of the High Command and its leader Vilas, who was secretly allied to the Romulans, as well as restructuring the Vulcan government, including the dissolution of the High Command. T'Pau ended up becoming a minister in this government. A less aggressive policy towards Earth was then adopted. Now, by 2161, their homeworld became a founding member of what we later became known as the United Federation of Planets, and Vulcans were known by the Borg as Species 3259. By the 21st and 22nd centuries, the Vulcans had also made contact with the Cardassians, the Trill, the Tholians, Klingons as early as 2016 on the Earth calendar, and scores of other races. And as of the 23rd century, Vulcan had never been conquered in its collective memory. Now, that memory went so far back that the Vulcans could not even conceive of a conqueror. By the 24th century, however, Vulcan remained one of the principal Federation members and was deeply involved at all levels of that society. Vulcans were present in the Federation colonies found within the demilitarized zone, established between the United Federation of Planets and the Cardassian Union by the terms of the Federation-Cardassian Treaty of 2370. They were among the colonist representatives during discussions with the Cardassians concerning terrorist attacks by the anti-Cardassian Maquis movement established in the zone. At least one Vulcan, Sakona, acted as a gunrunner and interrogator for the Maquis and made use of her people's ability to mind meld in the latter role. Now, the Vulcans' tradition of exploration continued in the 24th century. A Vulcan ship was the first to make formal contact with a Gamma Quadrant civilization upon encountering the Wadi. The Vulcans were at the forefront of exploration in the Gamma Quadrant, encountering the Rakari and finding the remains of the Herc civilization. In the 24th century, the Vulcan Ministry of Security was known as the Vishar. By 2369, the Vulcans had a saying known to the Federation, "We're here to serve." And despite the enmity between the Federation and the Romulan Star Empire, some Vulcans attempted to forge a more cordial relationship with their cousins, ultimately hoping to reunify the two cultures. Many of these efforts met with little success. However, Ambassador Spock made some impressive inroads. Now, I'm going to end the history of the Vulcans right there because, as some of you will know, in Discovery we get some quite big reveals as to where that whole thing goes, but many people might not be up to date with Discovery, with it being so recent. So to avoid spoilers, let's not talk about where they are in the 32nd century. So hi to James, and glad you could join it. Happy Sci-Fi Sunday to you as well. So there we are. That is the Vulcan race. It is also, we'd never even mentioned, where we get the greeting and farewell. Peace and long life. Live long and prosper. In fact, the whole sort of V fingers thing was in fact developed by Leonard Nimoy himself. As a Jewish person, he had seen, I believe it's formed that way within the Jewish faith. I hope I'm not getting that wrong or insulting anyone by doing that. It's certainly not my intention, but yeah, that was where the Vulcan symbol and greeting comes from. So there we go. Now on to the next section of today's Sci-Fi Sunday. We have our fan focus interview, and oh my goodness, it is an exciting one today. I can't wait for you to see it. So without further ado, let's go over and find out who today's fan focus will be on. So, welcome to Fan Focus, the man, the legend that is Mr. Matt Hudson. Matt, obviously, you're famously known for being one half of the Star Wars sessions with Luke Bly, Master Blywalker. And of course, you do What I Watched Tonight as well, the more general movie podcast.
Yeah, but that's been What I Watched Tonight. I started that in 2016 now, which and it was, I basically wanted to talk about films. I watched a lot of films. I wanted to talk about them, but nobody within my immediate circle, a lot of people would say the same story, but nobody within my immediate circle had as much of an interest in or particularly wanted to hear me talking about film. So I was like, well, the only people I know who want to talk about film was the rest of the world. So they're going to want to hear what I've got to say about film. So it's basically set it up just so I could review film, but also just talk about them and hope to build up, you know, a community of sorts, or at least a group of people, which I have now done, who I could talk films with. And then from that, the Star Wars sessions grew into what it is today.
And of course, when it comes to talking about film, you know your shit, because you studied film, didn't you?
A while ago, back in college. Yeah, back in college, I studied film, and it was the one lesson that I turn up to every week. I'm old enough now. College and all that are so far gone now, I can say. Didn't always go to all the other lessons, but I was happily going to film studies during the week, and every Friday there was an on-campus auditorium, so we'd watch a film, and then we'd have a chat about it, kind of informally afterwards, and then the next week, after once the weekend had passed, we'd get our heads together, we'd discuss it, we'd break it down, and in the end, we end up writing a dissertation of sorts about the genres that we were studying. So I learned an awful lot, and it really introduced me to the fact that old films really are quite good, because back in the early 2000s, the idea of watching something like Strangers on a Train or Double Indemnity, I thought, oh, I don't want to watch that. It's black and white stuff. It's going to be old. It's going to be boring. They're going to talk funny. And they did speak funny, but they're two of the best films I've ever seen, even now. And it's what, 20 odd years, 21, 2 years later. Some of the best films I've ever seen, I saw in those classes, and it opened my eyes to a world of film, which I tried to carry with me from then. And that's as inclusive as many genres as possible. I don't try to claim to be the master of all genres, so I can't tell you everything about the anime genre or the period drama, but I'd like to think I've watched enough to have an understanding of those, which all started way back when from film studies. Obviously, before then, I was watching horror films way before I should have been, and that was my kind of informal education on film.
Having watched Nightmare on Elm Street I think I was 11 years old when it came out. I can sympathize. I mean, I think I watched Alien when I was like 8 and 9.
Good.
I mean, that came out when I was 6. Oh, it traumatized me for life.
It's a good film, though. It's a really good film, though.
They are good films. Yeah, and it's not, obviously, so movies and film in general is not what you're here to talk about today, but just in general, what is it about movies that kind of drew you into them?
I've always been a creative type. Whether I'm any good at it or not, when it comes to what I do, isn't important to me. I just like having something to do. I like, or something to read, something to watch, something to indulge in. Some of it is escapism, which I'm sure we'll mention shortly, but there's something about being whisked away for an hour and a half, 2 hours, however long it might be, into somebody else's imagination, or into a world which I'll never know, whether like a gangster flick or a fantasy world. I think that's not, I'm never going to know those worlds. So it's almost like a romantic version of seeing them. But it's just a way of escaping for a couple of hours, and good, bad. You're getting something out of these films. Same as I think it was Billy Friedkin, the director of The Exorcist, said, whether or not you like my film or you believe good or bad one, you're feeling something. And that's kind of what I've taken just in film in general. Like I watch a film, whether I love it, whether I hate it, whether I'm about it, I'm feeling something in that moment. I'm taking something out of it. I'm learning something, whether positive or negative, that I can take into the next viewing, or I can go and talk to somebody about in the most unpretentious way of possible, of course. But it's just the escapism and like the romanticism of it all. It's something I've always enjoyed, and the magic behind the scenes as well. Like knowing how some of these films are made, even now with the kind of CGI juggernauts, which I'm a fan of, and back in the day when everything was shot on camera, it's all of that kind of combines. You're watching something, and behind it all is the work of, as you all know, lots and lots of people who've had to, join in the director's vision to make this reality.
Well, do you know what? You said something about like the world, like quite early on, then, and it struck me that it sounds like the world building is a big part for you.
I'm a big fan of lore and mythologies, and exposition as well. Some of the films I do like are when it's just people sitting down, just talking. Nothing else is happening. They're just talking, or it's some of the most mundane situations. I watched a film a few years ago. I'm sure some of the listeners probably seen it. Patterson. It's a Jim Jarmusch film. Stars Adam Driver, and there's no real story to it. He's just a bus driver who writes poems, and it kind of follows him in 4 or 5 days of his life without any real start, middle, or end. But it blew me away, despite the fact that it was just it was nothing. So I love an exposition story. But in terms of lore, if I can watch a film and think and know that there's countless stories to be told from that. So somebody mentioned an event or this character, I wonder what their backstory is. You find that out oh, well, that now leads on to somebody else's and somebody else, and then an event in this universe's history. I love all that stuff. I genuinely love all that stuff.
Well, that undoubtedly explains what it is you're here to talk about today, because it is replete with such things, is it not? Of course, you're here to talk about Star Wars.
I thought it was Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Buffy the Vampire Slayer, yeah.
Yeah, Star Wars. Yes, it's you may have all heard of it, but it's always in the news or on social media for better or worse. But yes, I'm here to talk about that with you tonight.
Well, speaking about whether or not people have heard of it, that leads nicely into our first question. But before we do, now Star Wars Sessions, of course, yourself and Luke,
Yep.
you like to open your podcast talking about your cheeky beers that you have. So in honor of that,
obviously, look,
this is the only Corona I'm interested in having.
Yeah, I've only got a cup of tea. See, school night for me. That's what I'm saying. Cup of tea, though. Oh,
it is. But I'm having a lager, not a beer.
You need a bit of lime in the top of that, or lemon.
I don't want a fruit salad in my bloody drink.
One every 5 a day.
I'm a northerner.
Yeah,
no,
that's
gotta be done. Honor of the Star Wars Sessions. So you said about like everybody's heard of it, and I think it is true. I know of one person who's never watched any Star Wars whatsoever.
Go on.
He's not a sci-fi fan, to be fair, but even he's heard of it. But if, let's say, Rhodians landed on Earth tomorrow. Yeah, there you go. See, Rhodians landed on Earth tomorrow, and they see a poster for, I don't know, the latest Boba Fett series, Book of Boba Fett, and they grab you as a passerby and say, "What is this Star Wars?" How do you explain Star Wars to them?
Well, I mean, I was hoping that they could describe it to me, seeing as they come from a galaxy far, far away. Like, what is this rubbish we've been watching for the last 40 odd years? But I would describe, I mean, it's always described as a space opera. It doesn't, George Lucas never wanted it to be a sci-fi or an epic. It's always a space opera. So I would try and break down the difference between a space opera and a sci-fi franchise or fantasy franchise. But I describe it as something that's fun, but escapism. There's the word I mentioned earlier on, because it is fun escapism, but it's littered with these great thematic content and messages of hope, family, love, perseverance, and all those kind of positive adjectives as well. But so that's how I try to describe it. Is it's a swashbuckling, fun space opera filled with all the right messages that you'd want your kids to see, because as George said, you know, he made it with children in mind. It's a franchise for kids, so it's something for everybody, and as deep as the lore is, anyone can get involved. So I'd sit the Rhodians down and say, come on, we'll crack open one of those beers that Stu's got, we'll watch A New Hope, we'll go chronologically, and you'll see just in that film that all those messages and themes that I mentioned are just distilled in that first film.
Yes, it's interesting. So I've definitely heard it termed a space opera before, but of course, as a Star Trek fan, you get the whole comparison between Star Trek, Star Wars, and one of the best comparisons I remember hearing was that Star Trek is a science fiction, Star Wars is a science fantasy.
Yeah, I'd go along with that. The Trek that I've seen, and since we capitulated on the Star Trek Sunday Trek Wars last year, Luke has actually watched some Star Trek, and I've watched a bit as well. Got just here and there, nothing necessarily in order. It's just, well, that was on, let's watch that. Watch a bit of the Next Generation, Voyager. I watched a bit of that. But yeah, you can tell that there's a difference. They're both it's funnier than I thought it was, actually. Star Trek, there is more humor and levity than I thought there was going in. My initial impression was that, and this is on me, was that it was very kind of heavy sci-fi, lots of jargon, lots of technical terms, and a lack of humor or anything like that. And in my head, well, I was like, well, Star Wars maybe has less of the jargon, but it's probably got more of the humor. But seeing more Star Trek, I'm seeing that actually no, there is a lot of fun that happens, whether that's just from the performances or from what's being said. It's not quite what I thought, and I've enjoyed what I've seen.
It varies massively depending on what series you happen to be watching, what episode of what season of what series. It can, some of them are really deep and dark and meaningful. Some of them are very light and airy. I mean, if you enjoy the humor, I'd say go watch Lower Decks.
This is the new animated show, isn't it?
Yeah, very much for adults.
I saw one
picture
with
the kids,
which is I would probably describe as X-rated on. It may have been on yours. It may have been on Conti's Twitter, but it was parts of it were censored for social media. I was like, this isn't the Star Trek I thought it was.
Yeah, that's exactly what Lower Decks is. Not the Star Trek you thought it was.
It looks great.
Yeah. But it is the Star Trek you're looking for. Do you see the segue through back to Star Wars there?
I like that. Yes,
the droid you're looking for.
See, these are the droids you're looking for. But no, I think Star Wars. It's for me. It's what most of us wanted to be growing up. That's what I'd say to any aliens is people like around the world. Whether it, so many kids, especially of that age when they came out. The kids when the films came out wanted to be a Jedi, they wanted to be a starfighter, or they wanted to be Han Solo. So it's something which is spans generations and decades and will continue to do so, because it's just a new modern mythology, they called it. And because of that and those messages and themes and the depth of which the universe or galaxy is being built, it's always going to be around. So I'd pretty much tell them since it started, it's never really gone away, even if the quality's dipped or some of the fans have sort of come and gone and come back again. It's an enduring behemoth in pop culture since 1977.
Oh, definitely. It's a titan. It's a titan in science fiction history. Definitely.
And I like it.
You mentioned that you'd sit this Rodian down and get them to watch episode 4. So
yes.
Is that how you would recommend anyone new to the franchise to watch it? Is in release order or in chronological order?
There are versions of viewing versions depending on who you speak to, and some people say you should watch 4 and 5, then go back and watch the prequels, and then watch Return of the Jedi once you found out who Anakin is, and then sequels. But I think it depends on who it is, depends on their age. If I was going to show my little one, she's 5.5, nearly 6, then I probably would start with possibly the prequels, like the Phantom Menace, just simply because they were very much aimed at kids with Jar Jar and people like that in it. She knows who he is and she finds him funny. So I think the original films might bore her a bit, because the first one especially starts off very slowly, and though they are great films, they're just a visual style I think might put her off. And 7, 8 and 9 are they still have the magic of Star Wars, but at the same time they are more, I don't want to say action, like they're more action focused than adventure at times. So whereas the OT is more adventure over action, and the prequels as well for the most part. So but then I showed somebody who was pretty much my age, and we started with the prequels, and they almost didn't come back for episode 2 and 3. We didn't even make it to the OT almost, because they really weren't a fan of the prequels. So it depends on who I was showing, what I know of their film taste, or just simply how old they are. And that sometimes can be a bit of a sweeping statement, but I think if I know that they've got more tolerance for older films or slower films, fine. My daughter goes straight in with the prequels for the fun of it. But if I'm trying to win somebody over, see, I'm torn between starting with episode 4 or going straight into episode 7, simply because of the recency bias that, this film looks new. You might have seen some of these actors, so you've got that comfort zone already. And this is the problem. I don't know if there is an actual answer to this question, because in my head, I just go 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 7, 8, 9, which sounds bonkers to say. But it depends on who I'm showing and if I actually want them to like these films or not.
Yeah.
Basically,
Yes. Well, that it makes sense. It's subjective, and but it's interesting. You equate sort of age to
Yep.
whether someone will appreciate a slower start to a movie and things like that, because while I think generally that's the case, I look at my partner now. I sat down. We started watching the Westworld series. Absolutely loved it.
Mhm.
So I said, great. I dug out my Westworld and Future World DVDs from yesteryear. I said, great, brilliant. You're going to love this, because
You
she's
hooked her.
never really been a sci-fi person. So
Mhm.
fantastic. Sat down to watch that, and I'm thinking, oh no, I'll stick on Logan's Run after this. It's going to be great.
This is it. This is the way. Yeah.
And now this is the way. Now she's 10 years older than me.
Yep.
And we sat through the first Westworld, and she just sat there going, boring. This is boring.
What the hell is this crap, Stu?
What like, when's something going to happen?
Oh no!
Because she's
and
very
crushing, isn't it?
Well, yeah, but she's all the Fast and Furious movies are kind of her thing, and she likes these. I know, right? It makes you wonder why
subjective, of course.
No, but bless her, I love her to bits, but we have very, very different tastes. Let's just say.
I've got to ask you, Stu. Well, when you were courting, did you tell her you were a big sci-fi head then, or did you keep that one hidden?
So there's a story to this. We met speed dating,
nice.
And after a few dates, ended up going back to her place, and and on the top of her drinks cabinet was a model of the Enterprise. The old Playmates NCC 1701 original Kirk version with the light up and the sound effects and all this on top of her drinks cabinet. And I'm like, oh my God, like, oh my God, you're a Trekkie. Oh, this is like,
don't worry about
fantastic.
The bedroom. We'll just stick to the kitchen.
Took a photo of her holding it, and I've still got that photo to this day. Because it was like, oh my God, this is absolutely amazing. She only told me later, like, oh no, that was the kids, and she never watched an episode.
But at least she kept it there, though.
She didn't want to say it. I've got it now. But no, she didn't want to say at the time because I was so excited.
Oh man! Well, that's how you know that she's clearly a keeper. That she didn't just keep you out and having this Star Trek.
Incredibly tolerant. Yeah, incredibly tolerant. And she has sat down and we've done Star Trek and Star Wars marathons together, and she's quite enjoyed them.
So, you do hear about the long-suffering partners or spouses, don't you? When it comes to content creation, because undoubtedly you want to watch the new Star Trek or whatever the latest series is, and they've got to go along for the ride. There's obviously that bit in the give and take, of course, but from our point of view, they've always got to go along for the ride, which is a pat on the back to all the long-suffering partners out there.
She sat through all the Marvel movies with me and everything.
Long marathon.
Okay, so coming back onto Star Wars and your history of it. So you mentioned about like a lot of it is for us kids, and like I get that because I remember growing up, and episode 4 was always on at Christmas and things like that. Of course, I had all the Kenner toys back in the day.
Good.
You're a bit younger than me though, so what's your first memories of Star Trek? I was going to say Star Wars.
Star Trek. Star Wars. My first memories are when we're looking about 1991, maybe 92. It was The Empire Strikes Back was on. It must have been ITV back in the day, British terrestrial TV, and it was a scene on Dagobah with Luke and Yoda. And I'm 7 years old maybe at this time. So I've come down as my dad's watching it. I imagine he's probably asleep at the time, but as dads do. But I remember sitting down and watching on this jungle planet, in my head it was, with mist everywhere and one guy talking to a Muppet, essentially. Again, to me as a kid, I quantified that as one of the Muppets. And I just couldn't quite ascertain what was going on. I couldn't really understand what they were talking about. The Force, and they were training to be a Jedi or something like that. I don't know what they're on about, But there was something about it that stuck with me, and I didn't immediately gravitate to it because as a kid, then I was, my thing was Ghostbusters at the time, Ghostbusters and the Teenage Turtles, obviously faster paced, very much geared at even the film. Well, the film's not so much, but geared at kids, And this was a slow, more pensive sequence that's happening. Had it been maybe the finale with Vader versus Luke on Cloud City, the lightsaber duel, or the Battle of Hoth at the beginning, I think I probably would have sat down and watched it more intently. But my first impression was, this is, interesting. This is strange, but it's a bit boring. But I've always remembered, it's always stuck with me, that scene, the one scene when they're sort of sitting almost opposite each other. But it wasn't until a couple of years later when the prequels type started. I mean, when 1997, when George was announced that the prequels are being written, The Phantom Menace, and the special editions of the original trilogy, the much maligned special editions, were re-released on VHS and in cinemas as well. And I remember going to see those. So I got to see the originals, special edition in cinema. So that was my first real introduction to the films on the big screen, which was probably the best way could have been. And then when the Phantom Menace came out in '99, I remember my whole family, we all went to see it. I've said this story on the pod so many times, but I remember it vividly. We all went to Pizza Hut in Guildford, and they had the cups, the merchandise cups with the toppers on. So we had Anakin Skywalker, little Anakin, or Jar Jar Binks, or Queen Amidala. They're really pushing the promotional material, and we'd get Cocoa Pops, and you'd have like a little gold bust of the characters in that as well. So it kind of struck me just how big this was, and I remember seeing the queues in the local Toys R Us back in Woking. When these toys were coming out, queues were unreal. Like the place was packed. And now it's sadly a different story. But so it was when I was about 6 or 7, I first knew of it. But then it wasn't until I was about 11, maybe, when I really understood. Went to see the originals, then the prequel fever hit, and then the games came out to support the films, and I went to see all the prequels, and then we had the sort of lull period afterwards. But from when I was a kid, it's been around. My dad's always been a fan. My brother's been a fan. My uncle, who I mentioned on the quiz, he's a huge Trekkie. He's also a big Star Wars fan. So it's always been around. We'd go around to my nan's house, and there would be the Kenner toys there. There'd be an AT-AT Walker or an AT-AT. The Millennium Falcon would be there, and different figures to play with. So it was always around. There's always a VHS fit lying around that my dad had or something. So it was a constant growing up. And this is mostly in the years when there was no new Star Wars, between 83 and, well, when I first saw it, let's say 91 to 97, there was a barren period. So we only had those VHSs or TV reruns to rely on. So I think that's part of the reason why I wasn't integrated so quickly, was because we didn't have anything to be introduced to other than the original films. But when the special editions came out, and then the prequels, when it was all new and the fever was beginning, that was my intro point. Same for a lot of people my age, and obviously nowadays there'll be kids out there who have The Force Awakens, for example, will be their entry point, after a 10-year gap between that and the end of the prequels. So it's always been there since I was a kid, but about 1997 was when I first really started getting into it.
Right. And obviously, like there's a lot in it for you. There's a lot of passion in your voice when you talk about it, and and as a kid, that's again that storytelling. I imagine the world building, even back then, was a huge part. But what overall would you say to this day does Star Wars give you? What's its hold on you? What's that connection?
It's that place to slide away to, and it's even now. I've seen the films so many times, whether that's to watch them for the sessions or to introduce people, or just to sit down leisurely and watch them. It doesn't matter how many times I see them. if I'm, they're always on. It's because I can sit down and I can watch them, and I could be transported to that galaxy far, far away, and it it's that escapism. I can get lost in the lore, the stories, and the silliness that I mentioned. I mean, I can't claim, as I said, that Star Wars is sort of grown up material, because it's not. George never intended it to be that way, and George himself isn't exactly dripping in serious sauce. He's a fairly well humoured guy. I mean, he is when he's got that plaid shirt and sneakers on. He's dripping in sauce, but it's the escapism, and I recently rewatched one of the animated series, Resistance, which I watched when it came out and thought, this is fine, but I rewatched it. I was like, this is great, and since then I've jumped back in and I'm Wikipedia and all the characters and all the events and how they tie into the wider canon, the wider lore. So it makes me feel like a sort of like an excited kid again, and it always will do, and I have no shame in that. It's been able to watch something, and when Han Solo flies in at the end of A New Hope and saves Luke, I still get that kick. When he shoots a TIE fighter and sends Vader spiraling, I still think yes. When the lightsaber goes to Rey in The Force Awakens, I still get the goosebumps in that. It's those moments, and they're indelibly etched into my mind. But the power is always there. It's the escapism, and it's the kind of being. It's a community within itself. Obviously, the Star Wars community in itself, most of the time, is great. And it's so for me, it's the escapism, but it's doing things like this, being able to find like-minded people and just having to chat about the franchise, or just having a laugh with, because you've got that thing in common. It's not just the USS Enterprise on the top of a fridge, which was the kids. We've got this in common, that we've got this shared kind of DNA between us, and all the other fans out there. And I've always found it amazing, and that goes for many fandoms. But in terms of Star Wars, you could ask anybody in the world, have they heard of a Jedi or Darth Vader or something, or show them a picture, and they know what it is. They've seen it. They may not have seen the films, but they know the iconography, and it's all of that. It's that kind of expansive world building, that lore, that escapism, the magic. It's the magic. It's what it is, Stu.
Excellent. Well, the Force is a kind of magic.
It's a kind of magic. It is. It's an energy.
Binds us all together.
Penetrates us, Stu.
Okay. Metachlorians. But we don't mention those.
Enough about them, though. Yeah, enough about them.
Yeah. So actually, this might be your answer to the next question. In fact,
no, yeah.
So if there is one thing about the entire franchise as a whole, as an entirety, that you could change historically, go back in time. You don't have time travel in Star Wars. Oh, well, I mean, do you? Because C-3PO just alludes to it in episode 4 a little bit.
I changed midichlorians still is what I changed, but no, I've come to learn to appreciate the midichlorians. We did an episode on the failure of the Jedi about 2 years ago now, and we brought that up, and we kind of quantified it that they'd lost their way so much that they now started to act as if they could measure or contain the Force itself, and they measured it via these midichlorian things, which they tried to bring science into it when there was you can't bring science into something which is omnipresent. So that's how in our heads we've kind of been like, well, that's our reasoning for it. Let's just never mention it ever again. But I think for me, it's an in-world and out of universe solution, and it's like eradicating little inconsistencies between the films, where George said he wanted to do 9 or 12 films, which he did want to do 9, sorry, at least. But you can watch 4, 5, and 6, and you can watch 1, 2, and 3, and they link up really well. But there's sort of little moments during them which irk me quite a lot, because somebody will say something, and I think, well, that's not what happened in episode 2. That's been, you haven't even retconned that, or the way 7, 8, and 9 were delivered was something which I so wish that they could have rectified. There was no real story path. You had episode 7 was J.J. Abrams, episode 8 was Rian Johnson, and episode 9 was supposed to be Colin Trevorrow, who's filming the new Jurassic World films, and we all assumed as fans or film fans that they'd get together in a room, they'd brainstorm out their ideas, on the big whiteboard. This is what needs to happen in 7. This is what needs to happen in 8, and it's going to end here. And then let's fill in the blank. You guys fill in the blanks in between it, but this has to happen. But that didn't happen, and it ended up feeling a bit janky and a bit wonky at times. It's clearly 2 different visions because Trevorrow left 9 and J.J. Abrams came back. But for his kind of credit or support, he had very little lead time or pre-production with the Rise of Skywalker to be able to tell his story. So him and Chris Terrio, the writer, kind of had to cobble together a story and then cast it and then get everyone together, start filming it when they had about, I think it was something like a year less lead time than they had on The Force Awakens. So planning would be the thing I would change. And I mean, I'm not going to, but I'm also not somebody who'd want George Lucas to return and say, right, I think George would have fixed all this, because I think George gave us everything that we love. That's all thanks to George. And I think he wanted to step back and focus on other things, and he's earned that. He's earned the time to sit in the airport lounge and eat those noodles, damn it. But so I don't think George would be the answer, but I just wish there's a bit more planning, a bit more cohesiveness, which I could see they're starting to do now. But in the universe, so not really, because I've been able to kind of reconcile with most things. And also I try to think of myself as somebody who, whilst I might watch something and think, oh, that was awful, what was that crap, or that character was stupid, or I didn't like the direction that took, like episode 9. The listeners will know I'm not a big fan of episode 9. I like it, it's fun, but some of the story beats, they irk me massively. But I still watch it, and I still have a great time watching it. It's only, and then when I sit back and think about it too much, I think, oh, I wish I hadn't done that. But I don't let it affect me too much. So if there's a character out there that people don't like, or a film like The Last Jedi, people don't seem to like that for some reason, or a particular story beat, I just try not. I'm not, as much as I love this franchise and one of those passionate things I'm most passionate about, I try not. I don't go to bed and get really angry about it. Think, what, I'm going to go on Twitter now and write something really awful and get angry about it. So in universe, there are things that are stupid. In one of the animated series, the bad guys use their lightsabers as helicopters and fly away. And I thought, oh God, I wish I could just jump out the window. Obviously, Jar Jar Binks is one, but I don't mind Jar Jar anymore. I'm fine with that. It's just certain little things I'll always think that's a bit naff, but I just get on with it. Most of my issues are sadly real world when it comes down to planning. You had the ultimate opportunity to give us 7, 8, and 9. And I really love 2 of those films. So for me, I'm fine with it. But they could have, that's the best opportunity, the only opportunity they're going to have to give us those characters again. And they fluffed it a bit by not planning it and putting money and release dates before the quality of the products.
Jar Jar should have been the big bad of 9.
People wanted him to come back. Well, we had Ahmed on the show, Ahmed Best, who's a lovely, lovely, lovely guy. All the time in the world for Ahmed. And amongst all of the fun and the serious talk, we did say, look, the fans, they think you're a Sith Lord. They think you're the ultimate bad guy. Mm-hmm. And he said, look, I'd love to come back and play the bad guy. So, Lucasfilm, if you're listening, Ahmed's out there. You can always retcon all this Palpatine stuff and give us Darth Jar Jar.
Well, I think Robot Chicken kind of did that, didn't they? Yes.
Yes. Some of their storylines have been better than what we've got in certain other recent products. But there's not much I would change about it. And I'm kind of just that's the story. I'll have a moan about it for a day or two and then get on with it. I don't want to live my life constrained by the fact that one film wasn't as good as I hoped it was going to be, because it's not my story to tell. But there are things, as I'm sure there are in Star Trek or the other franchises you like. I'm sure there are things in it you think, oh, I wish they just hadn't really done that or taken it that direction.
It's interesting you mentioned the inconsistencies of Star Wars, because one of the things I'm really, as a Trekkie, mm-hmm. I am massively envious of is the lack of inconsistencies in Star Wars.
Yeah, I suppose there's less product though, isn't there, in Star Wars?
Yeah, although Star Wars is now, I think, giving a good run.
It's giving it a go. I mean, traditionally, Star Trek was TV, and then they had obviously the films that came from it. But so I've always thought of Star Trek primarily as an episodic, as a series kind of output first and foremost. Yeah,
it was in its what people call the golden years. Yeah, very much so. But no, things like the Klingon designers evolved over time, whereas Sand People look the same in a modern day episode of the Book of Boba as
I
did
see
in episode 4. And
so
things like that.
And are they meant to be existing within the same universe or timeline?
They are, and they do, and historically reasons have been given that have been questionable, and and then they've changed it again, and no reason's been given. But I mean, the truth is, technology and special effects and prosthetics evolve and adapt over time, so they evolve the show, which I'm not against, but yeah, it would be nice to have a bit of consistency, and they can't go back to blackface.
Probably should do
what
that.
The original Klingons were. So
I imagine there'd probably be some issues there. So
there would be absolutely. Road mapping, I can definitely see, and I always thought that George Lucas had road mapped the entire 9 episodes before he switched on a camera for episode 4.
Well, I love George because of what he's given us. Plus, just George himself is such a strange chap. But he'd always said, I had 9 films really, or 12 films. But then, his vision for certainly episode 7 has always changed over the years as to what it was. Most recently, he said it was going to be based on the midichlorians. So it was going to be set in the midichlorian world or some utter crap like that. Whereas before, it was going to be something different. So he might have had ideas in his head, but I don't think he's ever had a flat plan from 1 through 9. I think maybe 1 through 6, because obviously when A New Hope came out, it was just Star Wars. It was a standalone film. George may have had plans for further films, but I think obviously depending on how well this hokey space drama they were coming up with did, and then Empire Strikes Back was later subtitled to episode 5. But maybe there was a plan, but I think when Star Wars was being filmed, I don't believe that there was a 9-film saga thought out at that point, because there wasn't really such a thing. Then you'd had trilogies going back to like the 1920s, but even then they were few and far between. The idea of a trilogy of films, let alone a saga of films. So I think when the original trilogy started picking up, and Empire did well, and Return of the Jedi was a formality to be released, then you go back and start thinking, well, how did Darth Vader become Darth Vader, and what the Clone Wars, what's all this stuff? But in terms of 7, 8, and 9, I don't necessarily believe that George really had that planned out. He might have had an idea, but I don't think it was ever set in stone.
Right.
Do you fancy a midichlorian story though?
Not overly.
yeah, good. It's not just me then. It sounds awful.
So obviously, I mean, and all plans sort of evolve and change over time anyway. We know that. But so speaking of evolving, obviously it has evolved quite a lot already. You've got numerous series going. You've got the Bad Batch as just series 2's just launched, I think.
It's coming in. I reckon it's coming in the spring. So the news dropped about it recently.
So that's what I heard. Yes, was they've just announced series 2, haven't they?
That's it.
You got series 3 of Mandalorian coming up. You've got season
Come on, Stu.
1 of Book of Boba happening at the moment. Although I would say, without too many spoilers, I think we've just had episode 1 of The Mandalorian anyway.
This is how we covered it on our recap show. Yes, we covered it. We're like, right, this is the Book of Boba Fett recap. However, not entirely sure that it is, but I don't think we can call it that this week. But hey, we enjoyed it, even though it was slightly jarring.
Well, they're obviously bringing the 2 stories together and into alignment, and I get that. And it's always nice to see Princess Caroline back anyway.
Of
Amy
course,
Sedaris.
of course. Yeah,
As a huge
Bojack.
Bojack
Yeah,
fan. So, but what's next? What's, obviously you've got these series and they're ongoing
Well,
now
yeah.
for a little while, but what's beyond that horizon? Are we going to get more movies, do you think? Or
Well, I think streaming seems to be the way. Streaming is the way at the minute, because like you said, you've got Mando seasons 1 and 2, which for the most part people seem to really, really gravitate to, and you only, again, without dropping too much, you only have to see the reaction to the recent episode of the Book of Boba Fett to realize how much people like a certain character, including me. I didn't realize how much I needed a certain character until I saw them on screen. I was like, this is the coolest person I've ever seen on TV. But you've got that. You mentioned Bad Batch. We've got the Obi-Wan Kenobi show dropping in May. We've got an Andor, one of the Rogue One characters, is getting his own show. That starts in September. Season 3 of the Mando in December, possibly. But then next year, you've got Ahsoka. You've got a show called The Acolyte, which is going to be focusing on the dark side character, which is going to be a first. And then beyond that, you've got a couple other streaming shows. No films. There was going to be a film in 2023, Rogue Squadron, directed by Patty Jenkins, which I was, mildly optimistic for and quite excited for, like a Top Gun in space. But that got shelved because of scheduling difficulties, or however they wanted to dress it up as. Kevin Feige is producing the film, and Taika Waititi is directing a film. Rian Johnson apparently is doing a trilogy, but that's kind of been shelved as well. So we've got one trilogy which was announced, which is Rian Johnson's, back in 2019, which we've heard nothing about. We've got Patty Jenkins' film, which was due to come out next year, which is possibly now going to be put back maybe 2 years to 2025. We've got 2 other films by MCU kind of stalwarts. No idea what they're about or when they're coming out. So the cinematically, I think it's a bit of a mess, to be honest. And it comes down to that planning. They announced all of these things, and in hindsight, I wonder if they thought maybe we should stop announcing things, 4, 5, 6 years in advance, because this is what happens. And I think in terms of streaming, you can get 2, 3, or 4 stories a year, which are stretched out episodically, and they can play into the wider story. And we look at the MCU shows with WandaVision, Loki, the Falcon and Winter Soldier, and Hawkeye, but especially things like Loki and Wanda, how they're playing in immediately to Doctor Strange 2 and things like that, or even as Spider-Man, there's a reference to the Loki series. They're not. So these shows you can watch and enjoy them, but then if you watch the films, it's making them better. It's enhancing your enjoyment. So, and I think the landscape of entertainment has changed. I think streaming has taken over completely now. When that started, obviously way back with Netflix, Prime jumped on board, and now everybody seems to have a streaming service. But I think streaming is the way. And with the films, 7, 8, and 9 in Star Wars had the legacy characters to fall back on. They had the original trilogy to kind of, prop themselves up. If things go wrong, I don't know, chuck in a legacy character or a ship so people can lose their mind. These new films aren't going to have that. So they've also got to now, whatever they give us, the pressure is on for certain sect of fans to blow them away, because they can't rely on Han Solo or Luke Skywalker. So they're almost trying to hiding to nothing that the next era is never going to be as well received as the originals or even the prequels. So it would seem now, given the reaction. But I think with streaming, you can get away with a bit more. You can harken back to these older times, or you can have streaming series set in these times and periods that we know, without egregiously flaunting the fact that, oh look, we're in the same time as Luke Skywalker now. Anyone who's seen The Mandalorian, especially season 2, will know that there is also a danger of falling into that familiar territory, which is why I like the first season so much, because it's just a new band of characters in a familiar world, but there's nothing that we don't need to know about what's going on with the main characters. You could mention New Republic or the Battle of Endor, for example, things we know, but we're not seeing them, we're not going back to them. They're just pieces of the history of the world. And I much prefer that. And streaming, you can get away with that, I think. but also you can just pump more stuff out, especially with the stagecraft technology they've got. You know, you don't need a $250 million budget now to create something like The Mandalorian. You know, I think there's 8 episodes per season. I think they've got about $10 million budget, $80 million. It's not small change, but that's 25% of what some big films cost now. Yeah. But the pop culture phenomenon that Mando and Baby Yoda have become is worth much more than that when you consider how much merch, how many figures, how many toys, how many kids' toys, you know, all that kind of stuff. You quantify that, and the reach is massive. And they can bring out The Mandalorian every year for the next 3, 4, 5 years if they want to. With a film, though, obviously it's, again, you know about production. It's not just let's turn up on set, let's shoot, and everything's easy. You know, it's a long, grueling process. There's more. The law of averages says the longer you're on that set for, the more things can go wrong, the more money that's going to cost. If people don't immediately react to it, do you get a second chance? So I think streaming is the way now. And if you told me that 2 or 3 years ago, I'd probably been a bit hesitant about that. But now that I've seen the quality of what they can offer, then I don't need a new film for 4 or 5 years. They will always be the tentpole. You know, Star Wars cinema for me will always be an event. You know, the build up, the speculation, the hype, to opening night, sitting down, and how they're going to open it now. A long time ago, we're going to get that on screen. Are we going to get a fanfare, the opening crawl? These are the questions I kind of ask myself. But I'll always be excited for a new film. But now we live in a world where by the time the next film comes out, we might have had six or maybe 5 or 6 series have come out, and potentially multiple season ones as well. So we're not in that drought period anymore where we have to crave these films. And that's because of streaming. Streaming has created such a new way of viewing. Then I think that is the way forward. And any franchise which doesn't really adapt to that, or at least kind of give into a little bit, may fall behind somewhat, because it's just that kind of like fast food consumerism we live in, which isn't a bad thing. And I don't mean that in a negative way, but it's, you know, we're so used to now to having everything there on demand. We don't want to wait, you know, but people moan about waiting a week for a new episode of Book of Boba Fett, when that was always the way in the day. But I think streaming is something that needs to be taken very, very seriously now, because I think it is the way forward. It's cheaper, it's more efficient, you get more eyes on it, and you can drop it around the world on the same day, and everyone talks about it. Social media lights up. It comes down to that as well, Stu. Hashtags trending.
Which has its downsides as well, because back in the day, if you had to sit in front of your TV at a particular time on a particular night to watch your thing. Now, of course, the moment something drops on streaming, it's all over social media full of spoilers. Yeah, which is a bit of a that's something that's going to need to be addressed at some point, I think.
That ruins the experience. And in terms of film as well, we had Spider-Man came out, No Way Home, that came out, I think, in certain Europe, like Scandinavian countries on one day, then in the UK and a couple of other countries the next day, and then the United States a couple of days later. You know, people were terrified of spoilers for that film. And the question kind of remained that obviously you can't, there are legal red tape and things like that, but people have always said, you know, why can't big tentpole films like that just be dropped on the same day? You know, cinematic around the world. Why can't Spider-Man, No Way Home? And I haven't got the answer to that, but it is a question that can be answered, because it's piracy as well is the problem. Is some people won't go to the cinema to watch it. They'll watch it on a crappy camera version, because it doesn't come out for them for 2 or 3 months. Ghostbusters Afterlife comes out in Japan, I think, tomorrow, upon recording this, and we've known of it for 2 months now, 2.5 months, and we know all the secrets and the spoilers, but some parts of the world still haven't even got it yet. So piracy, spoilers online, that's the downside. I totally agree.
Well, I mean, I personally think social media is the answer, where if they come up with some way of just, if you see any mention of this thing, hide it from my timeline. That's the answer, I think. But
because
social media
I get annoyed
by responsibility.
I get annoyed by it as well sometimes, because I saw today, looking on Twitter, people have been posting images from the new Boba Fett episode, and it's only been out for a day. And people, and I saw someone saying, "Look, guys, this has only been out a day. Can you maybe not talk about it so openly?" And you get the response thrown back is, "Well, you just don't go online." And I'm sitting there on one hand thinking, well, you know what? I want to go online. I don't want to be policed by you gimps because I don't want to know something. But then on the other hand, things like Twitter are quite handy. You can mute words, so you can ahead of time mute things like Boba Fett or Lower Decks or something, and as much as possible, it will filter that out and you won't have to see it. But I don't really like the idea of having to shut myself away until I can see something. I don't think that's the right answer. It's a lazy answer to me.
It is, and of course, if you want to talk about the older episodes,
yeah, exactly,
you can't because they're muted. Yeah, exactly. It's a difficult one. It really is. So, coming back onto the various series coming about, and this might be a little bit of a painful question.
Oh no,
I'll apologize in advance. But you mentioned about all the different series, and as a Star Trek fan, we got 5 series in the offing at the moment, so I get it. They are capitalizing on the whole streaming thing. It's what a time to be alive. But you mentioned about one episode, and it instantly put this question into my head: is when you said about there's a character from Rogue One that they're basing a series about. Are they in danger of stretching themselves a bit thin?
Well, again, it's all down. It's obviously quality should come over quantity first. And when they announced all of these, they announced 10 series at the Investor Day. I think it was 2020. I want to say November 2020. They announced 10 series, and they did the same for Marvel. And at the time, everyone's thinking, this is, like you said, what a time to be alive. We're getting all these series, this is great. We don't have to wait years anymore. And then one of them's already been shelved, which is classic Lucasfilm. Really announce it, get us excited, and then nix it. But I totally get where you're coming from. That particular series, though, that's the one I'm looking forward to the most. Rogue One's my favourite Star Wars film.
Really?
I think it's wonderful. Obviously, people whip me for that and say, "What about The Empire Strikes Back?" Oh, technically, in terms of film and The Empire Strikes Back is the best Star Wars film. For me, there's no two ways.
I hated Empire when it came out.
We just done an episode about that. Actually, the reaction in 1980 when it came out, that a lot of people thought it was a bit cack, or they even then the capitalism side came in where they thought George had stunted the excitement so he could tell story to make further films. So I know that a lot of people back then weren't. Yeah, this is it. So many people now are like, it's great. But I think it's the best film. It's the only one other than maybe episode 4, which can be studied, which is always in the top, at least the top 10 greatest films of all time lists. You won't find any of the other ones really in that. But I think with Rogue One, it's everything I've always wanted in a Star Wars film. It's got the humor, but it's also that kind of it's got the war, it's boots on the ground. The way it ends, I think, is perfect. We haven't seen that before in a Star Wars film, so I'm really looking forward to that series because it's set in the early days of the rebellion. So they've classed it as a spy thriller. So it's going to be this kind of ragtag band of spies, assassins, murderers, saboteurs, trying to build a rebellion whilst fighting against the Empire, who's going to be in their ascendancy at this point. So that excites me. But then on the other hand, there's a series about Lando Calrissian, which is apparently coming out. But this is we don't know when. But it is when that was announced. I know a few people were kind of like, that's okay, fine. That's going to be great, I'm sure. But they're not overly excited about it. And same with Andor, which is the Rogue One kind of spin-off. And I know a lot of people still who are kind of like, it's whatever. It is what it is. Lots of people are excited for Obi-Wan Kenobi for obvious reasons because of Ewan McGregor and Hayden Christensen's back as Darth Vader, so we know he's back in. But there is always that worry. I know Marvel have started doing it, or they've planned on doing it, where they have a show like Hawkeye. And then there's one character in that which now is getting their own series, I think next year. So a lot of these streaming series are built to spin off from. Like The Mandalorian I mean, the Book of Boba Fett is a spin-off of the Mandalorian. Whatever people might
Yes.
say, he was dead until he returned in Mando.
So it's a spin-off of episode 6, surely.
It ties into that, but in episode 6, we see him get eaten, don't we, by the Sarlacc, and whatever all the fans have said, he was dead. There was never really any clue that he was still alive. It wasn't until the Mandalorian where he was explicitly brought back. So his story was reborn and and restarted in Mando, and the Book of Boba Fett, because like you said earlier on, the two series are so now intertwined that it's spinning off of his appearance in that rather than episode 6, which is good. But then you've got other characters who come into Mandalorian who are like the Ahsoka. That is Ahsoka spinning off the fact that she's a very beloved non-film character from the animated series, but she was in the Mandalorian for an episode, and then boom, series. A couple of the other Mandalorian characters are rumored to be getting their own series, and it got to the point the other day where me and Luke were talking, and we were kind of like, right, obviously we'll watch it, but at the same time, what? Why? What's the thinking behind this? That can't just be told in the Mandalorian, and obviously money talks. But in terms of there's cash-in options for these shows, but there is that worry. There is always going to be that worry that it gets too out of hand, and soon we're going to have the bartender from episode 5 of The Mandalorian is going to suddenly get his own show about the inner workings of a bar in the galaxy far, far, which probably could be quite like Cheers in Space, could be quite funny actually. But I don't mind as long, and that kind of is the point I wanted to make, is that as long as they're giving us something new or as fresh as possible, I don't mind what they give it, even if it is Cheers in Space. If it is just the same stuff, so like Book of Boba Fett and Mandalorian, they're thematically they're very much the same story. But at the same time, they're still following two guys who wear very similar outfits and similar mindsets. I want, the other seasons we're getting are going to be different, but as long as they can pump out series, but as long as for me, I can feel like they're giving me something new and they're not retreading or rehashing or cashing in on nostalgia, I'm fine with it. I have my areas I want to see more of, and I hope they do soon, but I'm all for it. And like Luke says on the sessions, if they release 10 series, there's always going to be one or two which I may not like, or he might, or listen. There's no, you're probably not going to like all 10 of them. But the fact that we're getting that much, there's always going to be enough there, like a little tapas. There's always going to be enough for you to feast on and enjoy. But I totally get what you're saying, and you mentioned Star Trek's getting 5 series in the works. Do you is that a worry as well, that now they're going to totally drain it?
Less so for me. So one of the things I'm feeling, watching Book of Boba Fett and The Mandalorian, I haven't seen The Bad Batch. I hold up my hands. In fact, I haven't seen any animated Star Wars since the cartoon droids.
Oh man, yeah. Okay.
Show me age there.
There was a while before The Bad Batch, yeah.
But it does feel like it has the same appeal, like The Mandalorian has appeals to the same people who like the same things as Boba Fett. Whereas these 5 series, Star Trek series coming out, they're all geared at very different markets. So you've got Prodigy, which is kids animated, and you've got Lower Decks, which is adult, very adult animated. You've got Discovery, which is gritty, dark, adult. You've got Strange New Worlds, which is going to be more episodic, more like the Days of Kirk. In fact, it's set just before the Days of Kirk, but it's going to be episodic, brighter, more optimistic. You've got all these different. Each one's going to be completely different from each other. So you're going to get each Trek is going to have their own favorite series, and it's going to differ between us all. And and you're going to get those Trekkers who say, "Oh no, that shit, I don't like that." So therefore it's terrible. So it's going to divide fandom, but at the same time, I think it's going to keep it fresh, at least.
That's exciting. I find that
appeal. I think it's a good thing.
I know. I find
Um,
that very exciting because hey, look, you end up like an all five, and in that case, if winner, winner. But even if you
mm,
like one or two of them, like you said, they're continuing the franchise, and you never know what you
yeah.
might get back into one of the other seasons later on. But do you think then? Because I'm hearing you talking, I'm thinking now I'm the jealous one, you bastard, because I fancy some of that. Because you mentioned up top, obviously Star Wars is now owned by Disney, who
Mm,
have got their own corporate interests and their own image to look after. Star Trek is Star Trek's Paramount, I think now,
it is.
who can let them get away. Imagine with like you mentioned Lower Decks. I've only seen one image of Lower Decks, and you'd never see that in a Star Wars. And whether fans want that or not, the fact that Star Trek is open enough or has that pathway to be able to do it, I find that exciting. And like you say, that kind of that adult, more darker show. I hope we get something like that down the line in Star Wars, just simply for a deviation, just so we haven't got not everything feels the same. I'm sure they will be different, but just hearing those 5 pitches, it just sounds different immediately.
Yeah. But I mean, Disney's had its history of darker stories and, very adult
Oh yeah,
themed
yeah,
stories.
yeah.
So you
And
never know. You never know what's down the road.
I don't necessarily need an 18 rated Star Wars. I've always said on the show that I love, as you and I know, we both love horror. I love horror films, but I don't need to see like a horror film set in Star Wars with blood and guts and gore, because it doesn't fit within the structure that has been built. But as the opening of this new Boba Fett series show, the opening of this latest episode, shows you can get a bit naughty with a blade and get away with it a little bit and be a bit violent. And I was like, and I must admit, when I was watching it, I was going, yeah, go on, yes, go on, cut him in half or whatever you're going to do with that. I was getting really into it, but I also enjoy the humour, in case anyone thinks I'm mental. But yeah, it's just nice to know that you can have those different tones and genres, and there's something for everyone. And I hope that my franchise can embrace that a bit. And there are people out there who want darker or more mature themed styles because they've grown with the franchise, and I hope for them that they get it. But I just wouldn't want to see it going too mental to the point where do you find that at all that Star Trek is losing its at any point is kind of losing it, not its way but its identity, or is it forging out a new identity whilst embracing what came before?
There are many in the fandom that say it's already lost it.
Right.
I'm one who says so there's a thing with the Vulcans, they say IDIC, which is infinite diversity in infinite combinations, and I embrace that. I think the more diversity we have in the shows that we put out and in the fan base as well, the better and the stronger the whole thing becomes. So no, I think it's a different identity now. I think it's an identity that's evolved over time. It isn't like Gene Roddenberry's original vision at all, and that's a good thing, because while he was quite progressive for his time, he was looking back at from today's standards and morals. He was quite problematic in many ways.
Right.
So, it's that. Yeah, we have to evolve. We have to keep moving forward. That's the only way.
That's a good thing. It's a good thing, like you say.
This is the way.
This is definitely the way, and behind the camera as well. Like, if we can have diversity in writers, in directors, in producers, people who can bring fresh opinion, and that doesn't mean necessarily background. That also can mean things like age and stuff like that. By mixing it all up completely and having these different backgrounds, genders, ages, experiences, surely it can only make the product stronger rather than just having the same old tired direction that's been going before. I can't fathom how people think that's a bad idea. And if you do, I'm sorry, but the way forward is mixing it all up, shaking it up, because you're going to get new, fresh ideas. And it's like a musician as well. Who wants to? I don't. Who wants to see this? Your favorite band is trotting out the same old crap every time you go to see a gig. Who are you going to see? Oh, this band, they're just playing the same set list each gig. I want to see somebody progressing. Even if I don't like all the albums, I want to see them changing it up. So when I go to watch them, I'm getting a different set list each time. It's new, diverse.
Yeah, Queen, one of my favourite bands. And every time an album came out, every couple of years, you never knew what you were going to get.
Exactly.
You know, was it going to be disco? Was it going to be pop? Was it going to be
operatic?
Rock? Was it going to be operatic? You know, you just never knew what you were going to get till it came out. And I absolutely love that about them.
And you watch some of that. You watch their gigs. You see live in Montreux or Live Aid, and you get some of the same songs, but there's just a different mix. And you can have something like one of the hard rock songs next to Who Wants to Live Forever, and the fans are going mental because they're great songs, and it's the band that sells them. And that's a great shout.
Absolutely.
I want to listen to Queen.
Do you know what? You and I, I'm sure, can talk this subject for a long time. But we're gonna wrap it up. But I'm sure the listeners could listen to you because you talk so passionately, and of course with such knowledge as well about movies and Star Wars. So Star Wars Sessions, first of all, where can people hear you and Luke talk so passionately? And would you recommend they start with episode 1 or episode 4?
No, we're very proud of every episode we've done. We're closing in now on our 150th main episode. We've done about 220 overall, including like side shows and other things, plus about 70 or 80 Patreon shows. But we always say listen to the most recent one first, because it's what's happening now pretty much. Even if the subject is evergreen, we still reference what's happening now. Listen to a couple of those and then make your way back. Not because the first episodes aren't good, but when the show started, it came out of what I watched tonight. I was doing a series of shows where I just interview bloggers or people like me about films, and we just have a chat about film, and it was fun. But I wanted to talk Star Wars, and then I was on a forum one day, Star Wars forum, and I set up a topic, where in the world are you from? A very boring topic. And then a couple of pages later, some geezer said, oh, I'm in Basildon in Essex. I said, oh, funny that I'm working in Basildon at the minute. He said, whereabouts? And I told him the name of the road. And he's like, you're kidding. I'm on the other end of that road. So this guy who happened to be looking at the forum that day was about 300 yards away. So we met up and had a coffee, and that was it. We met up, had a coffee, and that was it. And about a month or two later, I said, hey, look, do you fancy coming on to do 4 episodes, talking about the prequels, the originals, the sequels that had happened so far, and then we'll just do, and then Solo, a Star Wars story was coming out. So we said, all right, we'll end with that, and that'll be it. We'll have 4 episodes covering the films, and we'll go on our way. So we did that, and then eventually got back into it. So the first ones weren't ever kind of planned to be a long-running thing. So they have a different vibe, a different feel to them. They're still good, apart from the third one where I've got awful hay fever and it sounds like I'm talking through a tube. It's horrible. But listen to the new ones and go back and listen to the old ones. They're available on all the major podcast providers. So Spotify, Apple, Google, Amazon Podcast, Audible. We say anywhere that you can find a podcast, we're there. So find us on there, and you can go to the website, which is starwarsessions.co.uk, to find all the episodes. You can find a repository of all the guests that we've had on from the films and the series. There's blog posts, there's a gallery. So if you want to see what we get up to at events, you can go and find them as well. So, but we have a great time doing it. We're friends first and foremost, and that's the main thing, is that we will meet up. We can meet up tomorrow. We'll spend 2 hours walking around Essex, having a coffee, talking about any old rubbish, and then be like, right, let's get down to business. So we're friends first and foremost, and I think that comes across in the shows. We both like to think we know what we're talking about. We're balanced, we're family friendly, we're positive. Even if we don't like something, we'll say, look, that wasn't for us, but we're not going to sit here and crap on it in case you like it, for example. So, but we like to try and put across a nice balanced atmosphere. And if you do listen, then we certainly hope you enjoy what you hear.
Excellent. And what I watched tonight, for people who want a more wider view on movies?
What I watched tonight, .co.uk is the website. That's mainly for reviews, which admittedly have been slow coming recently. Most of them have been in my head. but that's where I drop all my reviews, or just search for What I Watched Tonight across Twitter, Instagram, and Letterboxd, if anyone out there uses that. And you'll find me on there. So if I'm not reviewing films, then I'm happy to talk about them, or I'll be commenting on your post about films or something. So find me on there, and again, let's just talk about films, even if we disagree. We're all film fans, aren't we? So let's talk.
Brilliant. And we'll stick some links up below so that everyone can see and find that.
And you can hear our episode as well.
Yes, absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Matt. This has been absolutely brilliant and thoroughly entertaining. Always a pleasure to talk to you.
No, thank you for having me on again, Stu. Anytime, mate.
You're very, very welcome. Take care.
Hailing frequencies are open.
And thanks again to Matt Hudson for that interview. Yeah, Matt and I, we can definitely talk for England when we get going. Yeah, he's so passionate when he talks. Could have spent hours and hours and hours chatting with him. But we have the rest of the show to get on with. Make sure you check out those links, though. For the Star Wars sessions, for his Patreon, for his social medias, and for What I Watched Tonight there in the chat. Now, yes, next we're going to be paying a visit to the Divine Treasury. So here we go, and we have an unboxing. This time it is the Eaglemoss Hero Collector USS Equinox or Equinox. How do you pronounce it? Is it Equinox or Equinox? I'm never quite sure. So this one I've been sat on for not literally, that would break it. But I've been holding on to for quite a while. Wanted to do an unboxing. It's one of the larger ships that they do. Equinox, indeed. So yeah, it is indeed a Nova class. Now, there's a little bit of a rattle. I definitely haven't sat on it, I promise. But yes, this is the Nova class from the Voyager episode Equinox, and was commanded, of course, in that episode by Captain Rudolph Ransom. Captain Ransom, bad guy in a Starfleet outfit. So let's get into it. I know I've mentioned this before, but I like to cut the tape rather than peel it back. I know some people like to peel it so that they can remove the tape, but I'm always worried about tearing the box. That's why I cut the tape. We have our obligatory magazine. It's the smaller type magazine where, it goes into the specifications. Bit of the history. There's Captain Ransom. Bit of the history. Kind of a summary of what happens in the episode. Its design. There we go. And some bits about the visual effects as well. Oh, there's quite a bit in this magazine. A bit more than usual. So there we go. So that's the magazine, but that's not what we're here to look at. We are here, of course, to look at the ship itself. So, that's just a bit of polystyrene got on there. And here we are. It was just that rattling about the stand. Now, pop it out. Oh, that is a lovely model. Most of the saucer section is die cast, it seems. Nacelles are plastic, as are the struts, as is the secondary hull. But yeah, a lot of the main saucer section is die cast. Flipping it over, you've got the deflector. So you've got, is that a deflector dish as well? 2 deflector dishes. There we go. Very, very nice design. You can see it's part of the Voyager stylings there. Also quite reminiscent of the Enterprise E I think, in many respects. But very, very nice. Not much in the way of Aztecing that I can see. A small amount perhaps. Get this a bit closer. So you might be able to see just a little bit above the registry. There is a tiny amount of Aztecing. There are certainly better painted models in the collection, but there's also worse painted. But that's going to be a captain's yacht right there, and the bottom of the saucer section. Yeah, overall very, very nice. Yeah, a nice addition to the collection. I'm pleased with that. I won't say it's one of my favourite ships, but it's certainly not one of my unfavourites either. So yeah, very nice. There we go.
Hailing frequencies are open.
Now, keeping on with ships from the Eagle Moss and Hero Collector collections, let's open up Grabthar's toolbox, see if he's got his hammer or his screwdriver handy, as we build the next section in Build the Enterprise. Now, I do say early on in the video that I'm going to be doing 2 sections. This is not the case. There is only 1 section today. You'll see why as we get into the video. But there we go. So just to manage your expectations on that, let's head over to Grabthar's toolbox now. Welcome everyone to this latest Grabthar's Hammer Build the Enterprise sections 21 and 22. I'm doing 2 together. I'm hopefully going to do the next few 2 together at a time because I'm a little bit behind with my build. So yeah, let's get stuck in with so much to do. So first thing we have section 21 here, assembly, and section 21's packet. So naturally the first thing I'm going to do is get everything out of the packet. And there we are. We have a piece of the saucer section. We have some escape pods, some windows, a piece of the phaser strip, which I'm going to guess is going there, and some wiring, and of course our usual number of screws. So the first thing we need to do is take the battle section skeleton build. So here we are. That is this piece and the battery box from last time, which is here. I've got it nice and handy, and we want 2 BM screws. Here we go. BM, you will remember, means that these are metallic, which means I have to screw them in part of the way until I start to feel resistance, then turn them back a little bit to remove any swarf, because the metal screws cut into them, and then drive them the rest of the way. B just denotes the size. There we are, nice and secure. Now the next thing is to secure the battery box nut. You'll see there is a space for it, if I can get the lighting just in there, for the nut, which is here. Then the battery box end cover with 2 BP screws. P being for plastic, so I don't need to cut these ones in. There we go. Next, I'm going to put this to one side, as we do indeed attach the phaser strip with 3 CP screws. There we are. And next we flip it over, and from the transporter emitter, that's what this thing is here, we remove the cover from the sticky side. I trimmed my nails recently, so there we go. Made it slightly more difficult, and then we seat it into this recess here carefully to make sure it's seated right and seated flush. There we go. Wonderful. Now we turn it over. We are putting in all five of these escape pods. Now you remember the red line goes closest to the edge, so the red line needs to go at the bottom of these, and we have 3 blackout windows and 2 clear windows. So let's get Grabthar snips and get all this done. And there we are. Now the next part is to attach this to the main dish frame, and I'm going to use a single BM screw for that. So I'll get the screw ready. There we go. Pop that there. Put the wire out of the way. And let's get the saucer section. Here we are. So it is going in this section here, and these are what's going to hold the windows and escape pods into place. So what we need to do is flip this over, because I can't flip the panel over yet because all the windows would fall out. I need to flip it over and offer this up. Where is this going? Like so. So the BM is going into that one there. Get that in while I'm holding it in place. That's the downside to magnet. Oh. And I have dropped the BM screw. This is fortunately I do have plenty of spares. They do provide spares. There we are. Now, if I can shake out that. Well, no, that BM screw has just gone missing. Okay, not to worry. No, it's not there. Now you see, this is a problem they didn't tell you about. Is that's now overlapping, so I need to undo it. Make sure that is underneath that top piece. Now I can feel this is not going flush on this corner here, now that it is under that bit. So I've got a bit of a problem where this has not gone flush here. So what I think I need to do is just loosen off this side a little bit, so hopefully they can go in together. Let's see what I can do. Well, that took far too much time and far too much effort than it should have done. But finally got that more or less. I'm still getting a little bit of a rise on this side with this one, but that's the bit we've just put in. See, it's not seating properly, but then we haven't got all the screws in this side yet, so yeah. But I have at least got it mostly. There is still sort of 1/2 mil. I don't know how well the camera is going to pick this up. You can see there is a bit of an elevation there. Like I say, we've not got all the screws in yet, so maybe I'm being jumping the gun a little bit. Who knows? So next, start by, don't know when I like, from stage 19. Oh, I have no idea which one stage 19 was. My goodness. This one, in fact, is the one coming from here, yes. Which needs to go under here. Gosh. Which there isn't space for. So now I need to release these again. Oh, crikey. Go. Next, take the wire, thread it under here. There we go. And then I can start putting some more screws in, and another 5 BMs. There we go. So yes, as predicted, that's sitting better than it was. It's still not perfectly flush, but yeah, it's definitely better than it was. Not all the panels are flush. I'm hoping as we get in, as we add more panels, it pulls everything together. But there we are. That is that one. So, my goodness. Not going to bother with the testing. Oh, I ought to, I suppose. Let's have a look. Which ones are the new ones? That one and that one. Although it shows lots being connected, I'm only going to test the new ones. I've tested the others before, after all. So, nope. Let me get that more on camera for you. There we are. And I'm plugging into a battery box. So that's that panel there. Let me turn the light off so you can see better. It's not much better, but you can at least see. And which was the other one? I think it was this one. Here, they don't come in very easily, these. There we are. And that one as well, which is the one we just fitted. So there we go. It is coming along. Do you know what? Let's chuck a few more on, just for the fun of it. Oh, there you go. That's all I can fit in from this one. But anyway, gives you a bit of an idea. There we go. Right. Let's get that light back on. Let's get these unplugged. Let's look at what's next. So stage 22. Let's put the saucer section to one side for now. And let's grab section 22. Here we are. So section 22 we have another panel, it seems. And a bit under here. Oh, do you know what? That battle section bit looks very complicated. So I'm actually going to leave section 22 for today after all. So it is just section 21 you're getting today, I'm afraid. But basically I'm looking at how much time I've got to do this today. So yeah, it is just section 21, I'm afraid. But 22 you'll get next. That 22 looks a very complex one. So whilst I am going to try and do 2 at a time, no guarantees on the next one because it looks very complicated unless I get more time to do it. That's something I'll have a look at. But anyway, back to me in the studio.
Hailing frequencies are open.
Thanks, Stu. Yeah, so apologies for the misnumbering that has gone on in the back. I'm pretty sure that previously I had labelled stage 19 as stage 18, and then I forgot to update the title. I've now so on the title on the page, you probably noticed I've now removed the number completely because that's going to be easier moving forward. One less thing for me to worry about. But there we go. There will hopefully be another stage for that next week. Now we are coming up to the end of today's show. So obviously the one thing that that we do have to talk about is the latest in science fiction news. So kicking us off with some Star Wars news, the Obi-Wan Kenobi series. Now we now know, thanks to perhaps inadvertent tweet, that the intention is to launch in May this year, 2022. Now this is effectively, this was a member of production who tweeted it, and then retracted it. So it's officially a rumour, but it has been corroborated. The studio have said, yes, that's not incorrect, but at the same time, they've not officially confirmed it. So I think we can expect it May 2022. It's just not official as yet. We also know that the show is going to be set halfway between Revenge of the Sith and A New Hope, so bridging that gap kind of just before Rogue One, I would think. And of course it is going to be on Disney Plus. Now Foundation, Isaac Asimov's Foundation, for anyone who's had a chance to see the first series yet, this is on Apple TV Plus. Series 2 has been confirmed, and if you're not sure what it is, it's based on Isaac Asimov's award-winning stories. Features an international cast led by Jared Harris and Lee Pace, alongside rising stars Lou LaBelle and Leah Harvey. The adaptation of Foundation chronicles the stories of 4 crucial individuals transcending space and time as they overcome deadly crises, shifting loyalties and complicated relationships that will ultimately determine the fate of humanity. This is an Apple original drama. It also stars Laura Byrne, Terrence Mann and Cassian Bilton. Now I haven't seen the first series myself. It's one I'd like to see. Indeed, yes, the books of Foundation are phenomenal. I think I can understand why they've taken a long time to adapt this. But yeah, Series 1 is out on Apple TV Plus. Series 2 confirmed, but no date has been set for it as yet. And speaking of new series, mentioned last week about Orville New Horizons. Now, it was due to start next month, but that has been put back due to COVID. Now we know it's going to premiere in the US on the 2nd of June. Not sure about the UK. They haven't given any information on this yet, but in the US, 2nd of June. Hopefully we won't have long to wait thereafter. What we do know is that it's got a new title sequence and a new take on the existing theme tune. When I can speak properly. YouTube has a sneak peek of the new series, showing it's going to be very heavily action based. We follow basically the Doctor's son as he runs through the corridors during what seems to be an all-out war and space battle with the Kalons. Very, very exciting. We also get to see some new shuttle designs as well, and what looks like an adaptation of the existing ships. It looks very, very exciting indeed. Now over to Star Trek news. First of all, the Section 31 series. All we know from this so far is that it is still in development, and the official line is it's expecting a pickup soon. Don't know quite what that means. We know it's going to be led, of course, by Michelle Yeoh. So, yeah, really looking forward to it. I really want more information on this, but I haven't got much. Now, you might think, why would I mention it? Is because there is some news about Starfleet Academy, that series, that relates to Section 31. Now, we know that Starfleet Academy as a series is being developed by Absentia co-creator Guy Violo, and it'll be pitched to Paramount Plus shortly with the hopes of getting it going in the next year. What has been confirmed, though, is that if it gets the go-ahead, and we are fingers crossed it will, it is going to be produced behind Section 31. So we're definitely going to get Section 31 first, if it all goes ahead as we hope. Then hopefully we're going to get Starfleet Academy thereafter. One thing we absolutely, definitely, positively are getting very, very soon, of course, is Strange New Worlds, because this week there was an amazing poster reveal. Absolutely lovely. Captain Quinn's posted a copy in the Discord, so go into the Discord, have a look at that. It is a beautiful poster. It shows Captain Pike on horseback with the USS Enterprise. This is the Discovery version of the USS Enterprise above him, and the tagline, "The Frontier is Waiting." Now, this is a very sort of Wild West themed scenery view, evoking Pike's home in Mojave as he looks up at the ship, and a series of alien worlds in the background as well. It's a lovely, lovely piece of artwork in its own right. So yeah, do go in and have a look at that. And don't forget, while you're in the Discord, make sure you subscribe as well to the Twitch channel, hailing_frequencies, or on YouTube if you like, and subscribe. Make sure you hit that notifel. What the hell is that? That bell notification icon. I'm merging all my words together. Yeah, make sure you hit that bell notification icon so that you get notified of all the streams coming up, and there should be lots of them. So make sure you join me next time when our Star Trek deep dive will be on Star Trek's scariest moments. I can't wait. Well, hopefully I may have a fan focus. Not going to guarantee that, because as it stands at this moment in time, I don't have any lined up. But I'm currently talking to a couple of people I think you'd be very, very interested to hear from. So, scheduling allowing, there may be a fan focus, but there may not. We will have to wait and see. We will, however, be definitely paying another visit to the Divine Treasury. Hopefully more build the Enterprise and that Section 22 that looks very complicated. I'm hoping that's going to be there to get. But what you can be sure of, as well as the Divine Treasury, is the latest science fiction news from around the globe. So make sure you join me for that. I've been Stu Jackson. This has been an absolute pleasure. I've loved talking with you all. In the meantime, until next time, say it with me, peace and long life, as the Vulcans say. Live long and prosper. Take care.